NASA successfully launched the most powerful rocket ever made on a mission to the moon.
The Artemis launch also marked the start of the space agency's new flagship program. More details on this later in the news.
And liftoff of Artemis 1.
Good evening. I'm CJ Hero.
And I am Nina Richie Alago Flores. This is Mata ng Agila International. Now for the headlines.
The Marcos government says they are close to achieving 20 pesos per kilo of rice. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. vows to reach out to APEC leaders. U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris is set to meet President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. and Vice President Sara Duterte. U.S. President Joe Biden says it was unlikely the missile that struck Poland is from Russia. And former U.S. President Donald Trump announces his bid to run for president in 2024.
President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. is confident that this goal of lowering prices of rice to 20 pesos per kilo will soon be realized. The president led the simultaneous launch of Kadiwa sites in Mandaluyong City, where price of rice costs 25 pesos per kilo. Eden Santos reports.
President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. has graced the nationwide launching of Kadiwa stalls in Mandaluyong City. The president said the government is close in achieving his aspiration of lowering the price of rice to 20 pesos per kilo. Marcos, who's also acting agriculture secretary, said there is a lot to be done to achieve this. The administration revived the Kadiwa program of his late father and namesake President Ferdinand Marcos Sr. for consumers to have an alternative market to buy agriculture products with much lower prices.
Kaya't na yung nakita ninyo yung bigas, 25 pesos. Palapit na tayo doon sa aking pangarap na mag 20 pesos. Pero dahan-dahan lang. Aabutin din natin yan. Pero marami pa tayong gagawin. Pero ang dami pang nangyayari. At wala naman tayong magawa dahil yung pagtaas ng presyo ng bilihin ay hindi naman nanggaling sa ekonomiya natin. Nanggaling yan sa mga pangyayari sa iba't ibang lugar na hindi naman natin makontrol. Kaya nga, kami naman bilang inyong pamahalaan ay sabi namin, kailangan, wala tayong magagawa doon sa presyuhan, tumulong na lang tayo doon sa kakayahan ng pagbili.
The people cheered and queued to avail themselves of the rice under the Kadiwa program. However, the consumers are limited to buying from 3 to 5 kilos to make it available to other residents in the area.
Okay lang naman po siya kasi mababang presyo naman po. Abot kayang halaga. Saka nakakatulong na sa mga kababayan natin.
Kahit hindi 20 pesos.
Sana 20 na.
Okay na yan. Kahit wala pa yung 20 pesos.
Okay lang. Kahit pa rin tayo. Malaking mga sa titipid. Kasi pinakamura sa tindahan ay 38. Ito 25 lang.
The Marcos administration said the program is also beneficial to farmers, fisher folks, and other small business enterprises involved in basic commodities. The president said the government would directly buy their products to sell in Kadiwa stores.
Ito namang Kadiwa ay nakakamura ito dahil ang pamahalaan ay bumibili diretso sa supplier. Kaya pati lahat ng transport cost, lahat ng mga ganyang klase na kailangan bayaran, ang gobyerno na ang gumagalaw. Kaya nakikita natin kahit papano meron tayong savings. Kaya sabi ko, ibalik natin. Meron na dating Kadiwa sa mga LGU, pero kung kani-kanila lang. At nakita naman namin, maganda pa rin ang epekto para sa makatulong sa tao. Kaya nakikita namin, sabi ko, bilang secretary nga ng Department of Agriculture, ba't di natin gawin yung ginagawa ng mga LGU, ba't di natin gawing national? Kaya naging national program na ito.
The president also vowed to develop and improve the Kadiwa program. Eden Santos reporting for Matanang Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. has left the country this afternoon to attend the leaders' meeting of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation, or APEC Summit in Bangkok, Thailand. During his departure speech, President Marcos noted the importance of attending conferences such as that of ASEAN and APEC summits. Marcos said he would reach out to APEC leaders to agree on how they could promote food and energy, safe and seamless cross-border passage for Filipino workers, and most especially the existential problem that the world faces, climate change. A briefer from the Department of Foreign Affairs said the thrust of President Marcos's participation would also articulate the Philippine economic agenda and the empowerment of micro, small, and medium enterprises, or MSMEs. The president is also set to meet his fellow economic leaders and spend time with the Filipino community in Thailand before concluding his visit. This is the inaugural participation of the president in the APEC Economic Leaders meeting, which is anchored on the theme Open, Connect, Balance. This is also the first in-person meeting of the annual event since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. First Lady Liza Araneta Marcos and other government officials are included in the official delegation accompanying the president.
APEC remains to be one of the prime platforms to engage the economies of the Asia-Pacific region. The importance of this region to us and to the rest of the world cannot be overstated. We host 38% of the world's population, 48% of the trade, and 62% of its GDP. The largest segments of our OFWs call this region their second home. 85% of our trade is within this region, and that's the reason why Filipino consumers have access to goods and services from this region. But more importantly, our farmers, our laborers, our businessmen, and most importantly, our MSMEs are able to export their goods and services to the economies in this region.
U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris is set to meet with President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. and Vice President Sara Duterte. Part of the agenda that will be discussed is the concern on the South China Sea. According to a senior White House official, Vice President Harris will arrive in Manila on Monday, November 21. The bilateral meeting of Harris with President Marcos Jr. will focus on strengthening the partnership and economic ties between the two countries. The U.S. official is backing U.S.'s defense commitments to the Philippines, including the significant alliances of the two countries to ensure peace and stability in the region. Vice President Harris will also visit Puerto Princesa, Palawan, and would meet with civil society leaders and representatives of the Philippine Coast Guard and the local community. Harris will be the highest-ranking U.S. leader ever to visit Palawan. The White House official said the vice president's visit is to show the Biden-Harris administration's commitment to stand with Filipinos, especially on rules-based order with the disputed territories, maritime livelihood, and acts against illegal fishing.
President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. signed a proclamation number 90, revising the list of the country's regular holidays and special non-working days for 2023. The proclamation replaced a proclamation number 42, which was released last August. Under the revised proclamation, holidays will be adjusted according to the holiday economic principle of former President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo, where long weekends are observed to help increase the country's domestic travel and boost the local tourism industry. April 10, 2023, a Monday, is declared regular holiday to commemorate Araw ng Kagitingan, or National Day of Valor. Bonifacio Day, which was usually observed on November 30, will be commemorated on November 27, while the president also declared January 2 as an additional special non-working day as consideration to the family tradition of being together to welcome the new year. The president also declared as special non-working days November 2nd and December 31st of next year.
The Office of the Vice President has signed a memorandum of understanding with the Department of Labor and Employment, or DOLE, and the Public Attorney's Office, or PAO, to provide legal aid and work opportunities to Filipinos. This is the Office of the Vice President's way of realizing President Ferdinand Marcos Jr.'s aspiration of alleviating poverty and give more job opportunities to Filipinos. Moira Encina reports.
Following the commemoration of its 87th founding anniversary, the Office of the Vice President signed a separate memorandum of understanding with the Public Attorney's Office, or PAO, and the Department of Labor and Employment, or DOLE, for a free legal assistance and emergency employment program for Filipinos, respectively. The OVP said the agreement was formalized because of the many Filipinos queuing at various related offices of the agency seeking for legal assistance and advice.
Currently, the Office of the Vice President does not have any program that provides legal assistance to its clients. Hence, the OVP deemed it fit to partner with the Public Attorney's Office in providing legal services to its clientele.
PAO Chief President Wed Acosta said this is the first time an MOU is signed with the OVP for the legal aid of indigent citizens since our assumption to the agency more than 2 decades ago. Under the agreement, PAO may assign its lawyers to OVP's satellite offices. The move will help poor Filipinos to avail the free legal assistance of PAO.
Makakaasa po ang ating mahal na Pangulawang Pangulo Inday Sara na nakahanda po ang mahigit kumulang 400 distrito ng Public Attorney's Office sa buong kapuluan upang tumugon sa lahat ng referrals, lalong-lalo na ang mga maralitang dumudulog sa mga satellite offices at maging dito po sa tanggapang ito.
Meanwhile, with the Marcos administration's goal of poverty reduction and gainful employment, the OVP has coordinated with the DOLE to provide temporary work for Filipinos while looking for a permanent job.
The OVP recognizes the Department of Labor and Employment's lead role in promoting gainful employment, developing human resources, maintaining industrial peace, and protecting and promoting the welfare of workers to ensure that every Filipino worker attains full and decent productive employment.
Under the agreement, OVP will refer beneficiaries to DOLE's TUPAD, or Tulong Panghanap Buhay, sa ating Disadvantaged Displaced Workers Program.
Sa pamamagitan ng Memorandum of Understanding ay kami po ang sila po ang magbibigay ng beneficiaries sa iba-ibang rehiyon ng ating bansa, at kami naman po ay ang magbibigay ng pasahod doon sa ma-employ ng mga workers na ibibigay ng Office of the Vice President.
Duterte said these milestone agreements with PAO and DOLE are only the start of a meaningful partnership of our office with various government agencies for the welfare of the Filipinos.
Iba't iba yung mga nakukuha namin na mga concerns ng mga tao, and karamihan noon ay mga concerns na dapat idulong o i-refer sa ibang pang mga national government offices. So, yun ang direksyon namin, nakipag-partner kami sa iba't ibang mga opisina na nakita namin kung saan may bulk ng concerns.
Moira Encina reporting from Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
Poland's military was on high alert Wednesday after a deadly missile struck on a village near the border with war-ravaged Ukraine. Poland's President Andrzej Duda said there was no clear evidence of who fired the missile that killed 2 people in the southeastern village of Sewodo near the border with Ukraine. He also said the missile was most probably Russian-made. Police had cordoned off the blast site. Meanwhile, NATO ambassadors went into emergency talks on Wednesday in Brussels, where Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg is chairing that meeting. After the meeting, Stoltenberg is expected to hold a news briefing. Poland is a NATO member and is protected by its commitment for a collective defense enshrined in Article 5 of its founding treaty. But the alliance's response will likely be heavily influenced by the determination of whether the incident is accidental or intentional.
U.S. President Joe Biden said it was unlikely a missile strike on Poland was launched from Russia. Biden made the statement following emergency talks with leaders of key allies after a missile hit Polish territory near the border of Ukraine. Leaders of the European Union and all G7 countries, particularly Britain, Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, and the United States, were among those at the hastily arranged meeting in Bali, where they also took part in the G20 summit of major economies. The U.S. leaders said they all agreed to support Poland's investigation of the explosion. He said they would make sure to figure out exactly what happened and collectively determine the next step. Asked if the missile had been fired from Russia, Biden said there was preliminary information that contests that.
Mr. President, can you tell us what you know so far about the explosion in Poland, sir? No. Thanks, President. Thanks, President. Thank you, President. Thanks, guys.
The explosion in Poland, a NATO member, immediately sparked concerns that the alliance might be drawn directly into Russia's nearly 9-month war against Western-backed Ukraine.
Coming up, former U.S. President Donald Trump announces his bid to run for president in 2024. The World Trade Organization warns real risk of recession in top economies. And Sweden to send military and humanitarian aid to Ukraine. More stories from around the globe when we return.
Sa Counterpoint, bilateral agreement ng Pilipinas at Taiwan. Pag-asa ba ng mga Pilipino?
Our farmers should take advantage of this. No? Every year or even every 3 months, we send farming students. The best is agriculture partner.
Ngayong Miyerkules, kasama ni Attorney Sal Panelo, ang MECO Chairman Silvestre Bello III. Sa Counterpoint, tuwing Miyerkules, alas 10:30 ng gabi, dito sa Net25.
Balita ko, ang mga pusap-pusapin yan, yung mga napupunta rin sa Meco, malaki ang kita.
Sa pinakabagong season ng Moments, siguradong mas maraming tawanan, kulitan, iyakan at chikahan ang inyong mapapanood. Kasama pa rin ang walang kakupas-kupas. Walang iba, Mommy Gladys Reyes Someru. Abangan ang lahat ng yan sa Moments.
Panalo tayo pag together, walang talo pag together. Let's dance together sa Net25.
The news continues here on Mata ng Agila International. America's comeback starts right now. Those are the words of former U.S. President Donald Trump as he announced his bid to run for president in 2024. Hundreds of Trump supporters clapped and cheered loudly as the former POTUS finally declared his bid for presidency. In his first speech as a candidate for 2024, held at his Mar-a-Lago estate, Trump sharply claimed that current President Joe Biden had embarrassed, humiliated, and undermined undermine the United States. He said that under Biden's administration, the United States has become a failed nation. He also said Biden's first 2 years of governance had been a time of misery and hardship, fear and despair for millions of Americans. Trump, who served as the U.S. president from 2016 to 2020, also swore to lead the nation to glory and greatness. The U.S. Federal Election Commission confirmed that Trump was the first candidate to officially submit his bid for the U.S. presidency in 2024, just before the announcement. On November 9, incumbent U.S. President Joe Biden declared his intention to run for a second term in office. He said that the final decision on the matter has not yet been taken and won't be made public until the beginning of 2023. America will hold its 60th presidential election on November 5, 2024. The 2024 election winner will take office on January 20, 2025.
I will ensure that Joe Biden does not receive 4 more years in 2020. Can't do it. Our country could not take that. And I say that not in laughter. I say that in tears. Our country could not take 4 more years. It can only take so much.
Although recession typically starts in established economies first, it swiftly spreads to emerging markets. The crisis in Ukraine, rising food and fuel prices, and soaring inflation have all cast a shadow over the future of the world economy, according to the head of the World Trade Organization, or WTO, who issued a warning today. On the sidelines of the G20 Leaders Conference in Bali, WTO Director General Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala warned that the world's major economies face the possibility of entering into recession. She went on to say that developing nations and emerging markets are also at risk since they depend on rich nations for external demand for their products. The Geneva-based trade organization predicted just 1% growth in global trade in 2023, a dramatic decline from the expected 3.5% growth for this year. The WTO Director General previously emphasized that despite the fact that economic hardship is frequently seen as an opportunity for protectionist measures, free trade is the crucial strategy to overcome the global recession.
Sweden confirmed Wednesday it would send military and humanitarian aid to Ukraine worth more than $350 million to help it cope with the upcoming winter season. According to the government, Stockholm will allot some $286 million for military aid and an additional $69 million for humanitarian aid. The military aid will comprise the air defense system and ammunition, but due to operational secrecy, the government will not publicize the system or its value. Military aid also includes winter supplies such as tents and clothing. Meanwhile, the 9th and largest humanitarian package of Sweden to Ukraine since the war began will pass through the World Food Program, World Bank funds, and Ukraine Green Recovery Program to help those who are in need, especially people from Ukraine's impoverished neighbor, Moldova.
Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said Kyiv's conditions for the commencement of peace talks with Moscow are unrealistic and inadequate. Lavrov briefly attended the G20 summit in Bali, Indonesia, to represent Russia after President Vladimir Putin shunned appearance at the high-profile gathering. Lavrov also accuses the West and its allies of influencing G20 to come up with a declaration for anti-Russian sanctions. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky attended the event virtually, where he told G20 leaders that now is the time to end the Russian destructive war that must and can be stopped. Maria Finoshina of RT News reports.
Many expected this year's G20 to be tough for Russia ahead of the global gathering here in Indonesia's Bali. London, for example, said that the venue could be used to confront Moscow and call out Putin. Also, we expected to see some extra moves towards even deeper isolation, both political and economic, of Moscow. That was the German Chancellor's appeal again before the summit officially started. And the U.S. also had plans to turn this event into an anti-Russian platform. But speaking at the press conference that he gave at the end of the first day of G20 here, Foreign Minister Lavrov said that far from everybody is ready to support this rhetoric.
The answer is very simple. No one except the West and its closest satellites joined the anti-Russia sanctions. It is impossible not to touch on this topic because the West makes it a priority to throw the Ukrainian situation into any discussion. Third world countries are calling for a peaceful settlement through agreements. They know perfectly well that this process is hindered by Ukraine, which has legally banned negotiations with Russia.
And I have to say, we heard a lot here proving that the Indonesian president, who is the host of the G20 summit, has asked the Western leaders to tone down their rhetoric against Russia, while China said that Russia is too important to be excluded from global formats.
We support Russia and its worthy role in the G20 summit. Russia has strong influence in various spheres of cooperation of the world community. No one dares to deprive Russia of its true right to participate in international multilateral negotiations.
It seems that there is a division within the West itself. We more and more often hear words such as peace and negotiations from different Western politicians and officials. The EU now seems to run out of sanctions imposed on Russia. I had a chance to ask Foreign Minister Lavrov whether we actually can take this as an official shift, and if so, what could we expect? Let's take a listen.
You never know what's going on in someone else's mind. Short periods of mutual understanding with the European Union evaporate quickly. Just today I had a brief conversation with President Macron, who reaffirmed his intention to maintain contact with Vladimir Putin to find some kind of agreement and resolve the whole situation, as he put it. I told him once again that all the problems are on the Ukrainian side, which categorically refuses any negotiations and puts forward obviously unrealistic conditions that are inadequate in this situation.
The main intrigue of this year's G20 was and still remains whether its members will be at all able to come to a consensus over the final declaration, as the group, which brings together 19 of the world's major economies plus the EU, is torn apart by internal divisions over how to approach Russia-Ukraine conflict. The document is to be signed on Wednesday, and Sergei Lavrov, Russia's foreign minister, said that some Western countries wanted this document to be politicized, and they wanted to include condemnation of Russia's special military operation in Ukraine on behalf of the entire group. That would mean Russia including, and that is absurd, of course. Plus, India, China, Saudi Arabia and Brazil refused the move, and they refused to accept this condemnation. So now we have to wait for the end of the summit here to see what the final edition of the declaration will look like.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said Wednesday he believed a deal allowing Ukraine to export grain through the Black Sea that is set to expire Saturday would remain in place. Russia's invasion of Ukraine affected the brokered deal in July for the exportation of grains, Russian food and fertilizers. Meanwhile, Erdogan confidently said in a press conference at G20 summit that the exportation will continue and there is no problem. As soon as he returns to Turkey, Erdogan will talk to Russian President Vladimir Putin because he believes that the path to peace is through dialogue.
Head of the United Nations Rights Monitoring Mission in Ukraine, Matilda Bonnier, says prisoners held by both sides in the war between Russia and Ukraine have been subjected to torture. Bonnier says some of the former Ukrainian prisoners of war who were in the hands of the Russian Federation were beaten or had their personal belongings pillaged upon capture. They were then transported to places of internment in a manner that raises concerns.
They were often taken in overcrowded trucks or buses and sometimes lacked access to water or toilets for more than a day. Their hands were tied and eyes covered so tightly with duct tape that it left wounds on their wrists and faces.
Meanwhile, Bonnier says the POWs interned by the government of Ukraine have received credible allegations of summary executions of persons out of action due to injury or damage. She says there have also been several cases of torture and ill treatment reportedly committed by members of the Ukrainian armed forces.
question in Ukraine. We documented cases of torture and ill-treatment, mostly when people were captured, first interrogated and moved to transit camps and places of internment.
Thousands of protesters hit the streets of Lipczyk to demonstrate against soaring prices and arms shipment to Ukraine. Marching behind their banners, some of the protesters say the government should focus on resolving the cost of living crisis in the country rather than sending weaponry to Kyiv. Sources say Germany has forecasted a 0.4 percentage point contraction in GDP next year. The government has also imposed a partial cap on the price of gas and electricity that will come into force in 2023. The protesters claim Germany's current economic order puts profits over people's needs.
Ukraine has allegedly removed the permits of at least 6 journalists over their reporting from Kherson, including those working for CNN and Sky News. Kyiv's defense ministry asserts some journalists or reports violated their rules in combat operation zones. The official statement says the unnamed journalists filmed in Kherson without receiving the necessary approval from the military. RT News says Kyiv's announcement suspiciously comes after Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky alleged a pile of war crimes against Russia. Meanwhile, according to Daily Mail, several local residents who allegedly collaborated with Russia were tied to polls for public abuse. RT News also noticed a recent CNN report which accidentally caught footage of a Ukrainian man giving a Nazi salute in the city while proudly holding the state's flag. The news agency claims that other media seem quite fine if Ukraine ties people to lampposts or does the Nazi salute. As of this time, the parties concerned did not give further information about the present issues.
In Egypt, young activists staged a demonstration calling upon the G20 conference to adhere to limiting global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees and to upholding human rights. At the Sharm el-Sheikh International Convention Center, German climate activist Louisa Marie Neubauer says they are void of human rights.
We don't have human rights here. We are not allowed to speak freely. We're not allowed to protest freely. And I'm speaking as a privileged person from Germany. I'm not even the ones who face these daily violences.
Neubauer says if the Egyptian regime speaks about empowering young people, it should then include the youth in the dialogue.
As many others, we see here that for the first time at the climate conference, there's a so-called youth pavilion. The Egyptian regime speaks about youth empowerment. And well, indeed, we need youth to be included. We need to have youth to have a say in the negotiations. What I witness here most is a youth washing that is trying to pretend that youth empowerment works without human rights.
The COP27 conference in Egypt has been dominated by calls for wealthy nations to fund the green transitions of poorer countries least responsible for global emissions, help build their resilience and compensate them for climate-linked losses.
During a visit to Goma in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, former Kenyan president and mediator for the 7-nation East African community, Uhuru Kenyatta, urges to stop the war and start the dialogue. Fighting continues north of the provincial capital of North Kivu between the Congolese army and the M23 rebels. Kenya pleads for mercy on the people. He says it cannot be that a dialogue comes first, followed by a stop to the war. Kenyatta says the war must stop first and then dialogue can begin. The former Kenyan president says human beings are not wild animals and that it is their duty to put an end to the situation.
The Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, or ICHR, calls on the Mexican government to ensure an independent investigation into the Ayotzinapa case. 8 years ago, on September 26, 2014, 43 male students disappeared from the Ayotzinapa Rural Teachers College after being forcibly abducted in Iguala, Guerrero, Mexico. Allegations include that the students were taken into custody by local police officers in collusion with organized crime. ICHR Commissioner Esmeralda Arosemena says if there is no independence, there is no assurance of truth or justice. Arosemena says it is necessary to ensure that investigations are carried out with diligence, transparency, impartiality, and guaranteed with independence.
Up next, FBI warns U.S. lawmakers TikTok is a national security concern. Haiti and the United Nations appeal for $146 million to fight new cholera outbreak. And NASA successfully launches Artemis 1. Find out more when Matanang Agila International returns after a short break.
Full-on travel is back, and there are countless destinations, tour packages, and hotel and resort stays to choose from. Ito na nga talaga ang pagkakataon sa mga mahilig o may planong maglakwatsa. The 6th World Travel Expo by AdAsia Events was held with a big bang with a wide variety of travel deals.
They feel the demand from the visitors itself. They wanted to travel again. There's the revenge travel. We've been locked down for 2 years. Now we're getting back. Ang market ni World Travel Expo, since we started, mga young people. So sila yung very aggressive in traveling.
Open for business with Cesar Vallejos, Sunday, 9 p.m.
Good food, good times, good news. Balik kusina na naman ang inyong paboritong cooking show.
Katakam-takam na recipes, masarap na kwentuhan, at walang sawang tawanan. Kasama ng ating espesyal na celebrity guests, at tiyak na magdadala ng kasiyahan, kasama ang aking pinsan na si Sandy Daza.
Kain na! Dito lamang sa Lutong Daza sa Net25.
FBI Director Christopher Wray warns lawmakers that allowing TikTok to continue operating in the United States could pose a threat to national security. At the annual Worldwide Threats hearing, Wray claims it is possible that the Chinese government could be using it to control data collection on millions of users. He also alleges that the popular site could control the recommendation algorithm, which could be used to influence operations if TikTok so chooses, or to control software on millions of devices. Wray maintains a stance that China's hacking programs is the world's largest. He asserts that Beijing has stolen more Americans' personal and business data than every other nation combined. Wray's concerns have previously been raised by former U.S. President Donald Trump and Senators Marco Rubio and Mark Warner. Republican Federal Communications Commissioner Brendan Carr formerly called for Google and Apple to ban TikTok from their stores. The social media platform status in the U.S. has come under review by the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States. The said government interagency is in charge of scrutinizing foreign investments that could have national security implications. Meanwhile, TikTok's operators have been in talks with the committee about allowing it to continue operating in the U.S. without having to cut ties with its Chinese parent company, ByteDance. The site also continues to deny reports it harvests user data to monitor Americans' locations. However, those who oppose TikTok's request have demanded that as a precondition for it being allowed to operate in the U.S., TikTok must sever all links with ByteDance and Beijing.
Thousands of Brazilians gather outside the army barracks in Rio de Janeiro and other cities in the country, demanding military intervention. They want to prevent leftist President-elect Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva from taking power next year. Demonstrators say they want a better Brazil and do not want Lula to take charge on January 1st. Claiming that the National Electoral Tribunal was responsible for a supposed electoral fraud, the supporters of outgoing far-right President Jair Bolsonaro say they do not want a communist country. Bolsonaro himself has repeatedly alleged the said elections was fraudulent. No supporting evidence has yet been presented. Protesters draped in green and gold waved Brazilian flags and sang the national anthem on what was a bank holiday. Brazil's defense ministry has, however, produced a report dismissing alleged inconsistencies in the electronic results, while international observers also validated the election result. Lula, who was also president from 2003 to 2010 and left with sky-high approval ratings, won the October 30th runoff with just under 51% of the vote compared to Bolsonaro's 49%.
The United Nations in Haiti appealed for a $145.6 million funding to help fight a fresh wave of cholera that has already killed 161 people in 6 weeks. It is the first outbreak of the deadly diarrheal disease in 3 years since the Caribbean nation stamped out a cholera epidemic that began in 2010. More than 10,000 people have died because of it over the next 8 years. Haiti's health ministry reports close to 9,000 suspected cases. More than 7,600 people have been hospitalized. The disease has already spread to 7 of the country's 10 departments. The United Nations says 500,000 people are at risk of contracting the disease. Additionally, 4.7 million people, almost half of the population, are facing high levels of food insecurity. This puts over 19,000 people in a disaster situation for the first time in the history of Haiti.
The key to the survival of small and preterm babies was revealed in the latest guidelines released by the World Health Organization. Rosel Feria tells us the updated recommendations of the health agency.
The World Health Organization launches new guidelines to give premature babies and babies with low birth weight a better chance to survive and be healthy. Preterm babies are those born before 37 weeks of pregnancy, and small babies are those who weigh under 2.5 kilograms or about 5.5 pounds. The guidelines advise skin-to-skin contact with the caregiver. Usually the mother should start immediately after birth without any initial period in an incubator. This is known as kangaroo mother care. This shows a notable change from previous guidance and common clinical practice. WHO says kangaroo mother care reflects the immense health benefits of ensuring caregivers and their preterm babies can stay close without being separated after birth. Families can face extraordinary stress and hardship because of intensive caregiving demands and anxieties around their baby's health. WHO Director General Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus says these guidelines show that improving outcomes for these tiny babies is not always about providing the most high-tech solutions. Dr. Tedros says it is about ensuring access to essential health care centered around the needs of families. WHO reports that every year, 15 million babies are born preterm and over 20 million have a low birth weight. Rosel Feria, Washington, D.C., Mata ng Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
The world has reached a milestone. There are now 8 billion people inhabiting the planet. Let's find out what caused this rapid growth and what the United Nations is asking people to do. Joan Soriano reports.
The United Nations calls November 15 the Day of 8 billion, the day when the world's population reaches this figure for the first time ever. UN Chief Antonio Guterres says, "This is a milestone in human development, a day to celebrate diversity and advancements." The unprecedented growth in human population is attributed to 2 trends. 1. The longer lifespan of people due to improvements in public health, nutrition, personal hygiene, and medicine. And 2nd, the persistence of high levels of fertility in many countries. The UN, however, underscores everyone's shared responsibility for the planet. The organization has set Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. Among these are clean water and sanitation, affordable and clean energy, and responsible consumption and production. The UN says SDGs are the world's best pathway toward a happy and healthy future. The organization says to limit global temperature rise while achieving the SDGs depends on curbing unsustainable patterns of production and consumption. It will take approximately 15 years to reach the next milestone in the world's population. In 2037, a projected 9 billion people will be living on the planet. Joanne Soriano, New York, mata ng Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
Dozens of baby sea turtles are released onto the sands of Punta Chama Beach, Panama, heading into the Pacific Ocean. Although the reproduction of Flora turtles has been reduced due to the trade of its eggs, beach pollution, and the effects of global climate change, some people still care to protect the endangered species. According to George Padilla, an individual responsible for the Sea Turtle Project of the Tortuguillas Foundation, as soon as the egg turtles were hatched, they were released immediately but not directly into the sea. Padilla said the turtles cannot be thrown into the water because the turtles do the imprinting as they move towards the sea. This procedure enables the turtles to return even after 18 to 20 years on the same beach where they were born. Aside from the amusement of seeing turtles heading their way to the sea, viewers also learn from seeing such a scenario.
Vengo a traer a los niños a que vean la liberación de tortuga para que se vayan empapando en el asunto, ya que ellas son las futuras generaciones, y aprendan sobre el cuidado y la protección de una especie que está en peligro de extinción.
Entonces, ¿qué le digo? Que es opcional.
The SLS rocket and Orion fly together for the first time. A new phase in human lunar exploration is opened with Artemis 1. In a dazzling display of lights and music, NASA launched the most powerful rocket ever made on a mission to the moon on Wednesday. This launch marked the beginning of the space agency's new flagship program, Artemis. The unmanned Orion spacecraft was fixed to its top and will later separate and complete 1.5 orbits of Earth's nearest neighbor as a test flight for future missions that should see the first woman and person of color set foot on the moon by the mid-2020s. During the Apollo period, which ran from 1969 to 1972, America last sent astronauts to the moon. This time, it aims to establish a long-lasting presence, complete with a lunar space station to aid in the development of a potential Mars mission. The launch came despite technical issues that ate into the 2-hour launch window that opened at 1:04 a.m. During the Apollo period, which ran from
And liftoff of Artemis 1. We rise together back to the moon and beyond.
It aims to establish a long-lasting presence, complete with a lunar space station to aid in the development of a potential Mars mission.
Later in the news, Amazon to lay off 10,000 employees. Gila's games for sixth window of FIBA World Cup qualifiers set at Philippine Arena. And Mexico mourns Frida, the beloved rescue dog. More stories coming right up when Mata ng Agila International returns.
Alam namin ang iyong pagsisikap. Dama namin ang iyong mga sakripisyo. Kita namin ang pagharap mo sa bawat pagsubok. Kaya sa kabila ng mga hamon ng buhay, nandito kami para umalalay. Kasi katulad mo, gusto rin namin ang magandang bukas para sa kanya. Hatid namin ang dekalidad na edukasyon at makabagong pasilidad sa abot kayang halaga. Kaya huwag ka na mangamba. Sasamahan ka namin tuparin ang mga pangarap niya. Maaasahan mong sulit dito ang mga pinagsikapan mo. Sa aming mga makabagong pasilidad at sistema ng edukasyon. Ay lalabas natin ang aking talino at mga kakayahan niya. Kahit sa munting halaga, makakasiguro ka na makakasabay siya sa mabilis na pag-ikot ng mundo. Sa New Era, karamay mo kami sa bawat hamon. Kaagapay mo kami sa bawat hakbang. Kasama mo kami sa bawat ngiti at tagumpay.
A media report has said Amazon is preparing to lay off as many as 10,000 employees. This makes the e-commerce the latest tech giant to unleash a large-scale redundancy plan. This would represent a little less than 1% of the group's total payroll. At the end of September, it had 1.54 million employees worldwide, not counting seasonal workers recruited during periods of increased activity. News sources say the affected positions will be located in Amazon's devices department, the retail division, and human resources. The distribution by country was not specified. The report says that the total number of employees laid off could change, but it confirmed it would be the largest round of firings in the history of the 28-year-old company. Amazon doubled its workforce from the first quarter of 2020 to 1.62 million employees 2 years later. But with the economy souring, Amazon announced a hiring freeze 2 weeks ago, and its workforce has already decreased compared to the beginning of the year.
Gear up, ballers. The Philippine Arena is set to host the sixth window of the 2023 FIBA Basketball World Cup Asian qualifiers in February, with Gilas Pilipinas facing Lebanon and Jordan. According to Sonny Barrios, the Samahang Basketball ng Pilipinas Executive Director, regardless of the result from the fifth window, Philippine Arena is still the preferred venue of Gilas Pilipinas games in the sixth window of FIBA World Cup qualifiers. Barrios added that the upcoming February window will give the local organizing committee enough time to plan and prepare ahead of the much-awaited event. Meanwhile, Smart Araneta Coliseum and Mall of Asia Arena will be the two other venues for the group stages before heading to Philippine Arena on their final stage. On February 24, Gilas will face Lebanon, and 3 days later, they will square off with Jordan. As of now, Gilas Pilipinas holds a 5-3 win-lose slate in pool after beating Jordan and Saudi Arabia on the on the road in their fifth window.
The Philippine Nurses Association says it will make a movie that will pay tribute to Filipino nurses. The film will be titled Siglo ng Kalinga and will be directed by Lem Lorca and produced by Dr. Carl Balita. Some of the Filipino nurses that will star in the movie are Abby Romero, Denmark Mismanos, Joel Alano, Lorich Del Tantoco, Joel Ray Carcasano, Jericho Roque, and Joy Ras. According to the PNA, the characters in the movie will be portrayed by true nurses and other medical professionals. The movie is intended for the celebration of the 100th year of PNA. The said organization is founded by Anastasia Giron Tupas. Elon Musk has many labels, but is he also the inspiration for Netflix's new whodunit, Glass Onion Knives Out mystery? The movie tells the story of a detective played by Daniel Craig who investigates a murder on the private Greek island of a tech billionaire called Miles Braun. Meanwhile, Braun, played by Edward Norton, a brash entrepreneur and a self-proclaimed genius who owns multiple companies, is the character parallel to Musk, who owns SpaceX, Tesla, and now Twitter. But according to writer-director Ryan Johnson, the character was not based on just one real-life figure. In fact, a lot of tech billionaires may possibly think it's about them. Glass Onion is a sequel to 2019's Knives Out, which will be the first Netflix film to play in major U.S. theater chains for a one-week run. Glass Onion is set to hit the theaters on November 23 and will stream on Netflix a month later.
Patience is a virtue, but can you really wait 30 years to eat a perfect Japanese Wagyu beef? Yes, you heard that right. Because if you order a box of frozen Kobe beef from Croquettes from Asahiya now, it will take another 30 years before you receive your perfect order. Asahiya sells Kobe beef or a Wagyu beef cube, which comes from the Tajima strain of Japanese white or black cattle. According to trademark rules set by the Kobe Beef Marketing and Distribution Promotion Association, the Japanese black cattle are raised in Hyogo Prefecture. This particular beef is a delicacy and is valued for its flavor, tenderness, and fatty, well-marbled texture. And the Asahiya Butcher Shop in Kasago City has perfected Kobe's recipe. Shigeru Nita, third-generation owner of Asahiya, says each box of extreme croquettes, which include 5 pieces, sells for 2,700 Japanese yen or $18.40. Nita says the extreme croquettes are freshly made daily with no preservatives. Asahiya's unique concept caught the attention of locals and the media, hence a 30-year waiting list. But if you cannot wait for 3 decades to receive the top brand Kobe beef, Asahiya's premier Kobe beef croquettes also have a more palatable 4-year wait list. However, Asahiya's frozen beef croquettes are only shipped domestically or within Japan only.
Well, not all heroes wear capes. Some simply wear goggles and booties to save lives. Meanwhile, there was an outpouring of tributes for the famous Mexican rescue dog who died Tuesday due to an age-related illness. Frida, a Labrador retriever, is fondly remembered as a hero to survivors in a school in Mexico City after a 7.1 magnitude quake in 2017 struck the area and killed 370 people. The rescue dog was a member of the Mexican Marines Canine Unit who also took part in emergency response efforts abroad, including earthquakes in Haiti and Ecuador. During her decade-long career, Frida was credited for saving 12 lives before officially retiring in 2019. In a social media post from the Navy, Frida was given thanks and appreciation for serving Mexico. The post ended with a vow to uphold Frida's legacy of nobility, loyalty, and love for the nation.
To help you go through this week, here's a quote from Seth Godin, an entrepreneur, best-selling author, and speaker. How dare you settle for less when the world has made it so easy for you to be remarkable?
That's why you have to carve your own path and do not fall into the trap of becoming like everyone else, like on Instagram or on TikTok.
Don't let the people around you dictate who you should be.
Yeah. And that is a wrap for tonight's news. Catch the latest updates on our social media channels. I'm CJ Hero.
And I am Nina Richie Alago Flores. Stay tuned for Attorney Sal Panelo's Counterpoint with DOLA Secretary Silvestre Bello III. This is Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.